Hello students, welcome to my yet another class or session in this series of online classes. Today I have come in front of you with one more unit from your textbook again, and this time it is not a prose or poetry, it is a drama, not a full length play, a one act play, The Watchman of the Lake by R.K. Narayan. The Watchman of the Lake by R.K. Narayan. Before I go to the unit directly, let me introduce to you this writer, that is R.K. Narayan. As you can guess, he is a writer from India. Rishipuram Krishnaswamy Iyengar Narayana Swamy, who is by a short name known as R.K. Narayan, and he belongs to a particular fraction of English literature called as Indian English literature. What is this Indian English literature? So it is nothing but the literature produced by the Indian writers whose mother tongue is not English. So they have some of the Indian languages as their mother tongue, and English is their second language, and they write their works in English. So naturally, as such, the writings of these people, these Indian writers, is comparatively easier compared to that of the British writers. So we have a vast output in literature written by these Indian English writers, and it began in the pre-independence period, and it is flourishing with even more popularity today in the modern world. From Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore, Sri Aurobindo, then Sarojini Naidu. In the earlier stages, we find these writers in this particular category. Then in the middle period, we have this R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao, who three of whom are called as major trio of Indian English novel. And then we have Khushwant Singh, then Nayanthara Sehgal, then Shashi Deshpande, Anita Desai, or if you come to the recent age, then we have Upamanyu Chatterjee, then Kiran Desai, Arvind Adiga, and a very popular name of the youngsters, that is Chetan Bhagat, and another popular name among the kids, Sudha Murthy. So all these people belong to the recent age. So the literature produced by these all Indian whose mother tongue is not English, that we put under the title Indian English literature. So similarly, we have American English literature, that is the literature produced by or written by the Americans whose mother tongue is not English, Spanish or some other language, like Mark Twain, Henry James, Emily Dickinson. We have so many names there, Longfellow. So all these people belong to the American English literature. Similarly, we have African English literature. You have studied the first lesson, The Gentleman of Jungle by Jomo Kenyatta. So Jomo Kenyatta, then Chinua Achebe, whose work you are going to study in the second year, Voter, a story written by Chinua Achebe. So these people belong to the African English literature. So likewise, we have these different categories of English literature in all those countries which were earlier the colonies of British Empire. Now to speak about this man, that is Rishipuram Krishnaswamy Iyengar Narayana Swamy, or R.K. Narayan, he is a very popular household name in the Indian society, we can say, because many of the stories written by this man have appeared in the television serial. For example, the Malgudi Days, which was a popular serial in Doordarshan some years back, or it was even recast in some other channels recently. So these stories are written by R.K. Narayan. Likewise, the film Guide, it is based again on this the novel written by R.K. Narayan by the same name. The guide novel is has appeared in the form of a film. Besides this, he has written many other short stories like Astrologer's Day, The Doctor's Word, among the most popular stories. To name his other novels, The Man-Eater of Malgudi, The Financial Expert, The Vendor of Sweets, then The English Teacher, The Bachelor of Arts, The Dark Room, The Swami and Friends, so Mr. Sampath. So the list is never ending. So it is the list is so long. He has written so many novels to name. Now, actually, you are not asked any questions on these writers or their works. Then why I am telling you all these names or all these writers? Not to waste either your time or my time. Why I am introducing these people to you or these pieces of literature to you is just to acquaint you with this type of literature, which is bit easier and which can invite you to read at least some of the stories. If you get time, now that you are not that busy, you can go for reading some of the stories of this writer, or if you don't like this writer belonging to the past century, you can go for some of the novels of the recent and most popular writer of the youngsters, that is Chetan Bhagat, because many of his novels have appeared in the form of film. For example, you know, Three Idiots, Kai Poche, or Two States, then Half Girlfriend. So all these films are based on the novels written by Chetan Bhagat. So I am introducing you to this man so that you can go for reading those works, and by doing so you can expand your vocabulary, you can improve your grammar or usage, and by doing so you can develop the linguistic competence. So you need not read only from the examination point of view, especially with regards to English. If you really want to improve English, you must do the other reading, that's extra reading. And now that you have got the time, I am specifically stressing this point, or I am trying to introduce these recent writers or their works to you. So this is, I hope, enough for you about the writer. Now if we go to this story, I would like to tell you something about the background needed to understand this story. The Watchman of the Lake. The title is not that difficult to understand. Watchman is a guard, okay, and lake is a pond, a water body. Now it is based on a person who worked as a watchman of a lake. And one important aspect to stress here is that usually in the stories of R.K. Narayan, whichever the places he referred to, those places are mostly fictitious. Those never exist in the real life. Now for example, Malgudi. This is a completely imaginary town created by R.K. Narayan in his first novel Swami and Friends, and then often repeated in many of his works. Okay, but as against it, unlike the other things, here this particular lake, it really exists today in the modern world or in particular place, that is in Chikkamangaluru. You might have heard of Baba Budangiri Hills, isn't it? Now at the eastern base of Baba Budangiri Hills, we find a town called Sakrepatna. The name of the town is Sakrepatna, and some 4 kilometers or 6 kilometers away from Sakrepatna is located a lake called Ayyanakere. This Ayyanakere is somewhat 20 kilometers away from the town of Chikkamangaluru and just 4 or 6 kilometers from Sakrepatna. This Ayyanakere, it is so vast that even today it irrigates some 1560 hectares of land. It irrigates the so vast land, and because of the existence of this lake, it is possible, or it has even increased the groundwater level of the surrounding villages, extending up to some 30 to 40 kilometers. So just imagine the capacity of the lake, and it never dries up. Even though the water is used so many times for the irrigation purpose, still the water never dries up. And this lake has the history of many centuries. So according to the reliable sources, it was built in the 12th century by a king named Rukmangada Raya. And later in the 16th century, it was renovated by some Hoysala kings. And there are so many legends also linked with this lake. One legend says that this lake used to breach in every rainy season, and after performing some rituals which were suggested by one saint named some Nirvana Swami, that calamity stopped. And another legend says that some two rustics, one Nirganti or waterman or watchman of that lake named some Honnabilla, and one cowherd named Channabilla. So both of them, once when some tragedy was to befall, or when the lake was about to breach, and when the goddess of the lake appeared before them and expressed her disastrous wish, these two people, by sacrificing their lives, they saved the lake, and the flood never took place at all. Even the history also supports this legend. Now how far these legends are true, we don't know. But in the description, the background description given before the start of your drama, there is a mention of one particular man whose statue is installed in the center of this Sakrepatna. In the center of the town there is a statue, and the people believe that it was built to commemorate some rustic who had done some sacrifice for the lake. So that belief is there. So now how far the statue exists there, I don't know, but lake is there, because even if you search it in GPS, you will be able to find that lake. Now the story here, the story given here, it is based on this particular lake. Now whether it can be linked with the legend or not, that is left to you. After listening to the story, you can go through. Now about the structure of the drama, as I told you, it is a one act play. Only one act we find here, not a full length play which you usually have 5 to 7 acts. So here we have only one act, and this one act is divided into 5 scenes. So this play is spread over, or the scenes change 5 times in this particular drama. So totally we have 5 scenes. And the important characters, the dramatis personae we say. So they are, first main character is Mara, then we have his son Ganga and his son whose name is not referred. Then we have the village headman and the workers who are busy doing the road construction work. Then we have the king, and besides this there are some other minor characters we will come to know as we go with the narration. Now the first scene is mainly between Mara and the headman, the interaction between Mara and headman. In the second scene we find again Mara and the king, and in the third scene we see Mara with his son Ganga. Fourth again Mara and king, and in the last scene Ganga and his son. Now in my first session I would not be able to deal with all these 5 scenes. Let us see 2 or 3 scenes we will go through now in this first session. Now, as I did with my prose lesson, I would not like to read the whole text in front of you. I will just go on summarizing the happenings of the first or second or third scene in my discussion, and the main points which I would like to stress. So, we will discuss only these things. So, in the first scene we see when the curtain rises. Usually when the drama is given for your study, we find in the brackets some description given for performing it on the stage. So here also the directions we find given, and in the direction we are told that the road construction work is going on. The workers are busy swinging their implements like crowbar, spade and all those things, and the headman, the village headman, who is the head of the village, he is supervising the construction work, and everything is all right. When the curtain rises, everything is well, the work is in full swing. But while the headman is in a very angry mood, giving them directions and asking them to hasten the work, so that the work will be finished by the end of the day, because the king was to arrive on that route the next morning. So before that, the headman wants to finish the road construction work, so he is busy giving the directions. But suddenly we find the workers are disturbed, and some of them are giggling among themselves. They are laughing or they are chatting among them. Especially the two workers seem to be distracted by the work, and they are not involved in the work which the headman is asking or he is directing them to do, and their attention is somewhere else. And when the headman takes them to task, those two workers, they say that no, we were disturbed by Mara. We were actually busy with our work, but in the middle we are disturbed by Mara, and that is why we are not in a position to continue our work. The very name, the mention of Mara, it disturbs our headman, because headman has a very negative idea or negative image about Mara. He does not respect Mara. He calls him a fool, a worthless dog, a wretched dog. So when the workers mention the name of Mara, he is at once enraged by his name, and he asks those workers to bring him before his presence, or bring him before him. Then the workers say, no, he has sprang up the hill, he has disappeared. Then the headman, even though he is in such a hurry, he asks those workers to chase him and catch hold of him and bring before his presence. And those workers, leaving all the work aside, they go in search of Mara, and they bring him and they present him before the headman. Now the headman starts his abuses on Mara. Why you are disturbing my workers, he first says. And observe here, see the attitude, the way Mara answers. Mara says, I am not disturbing them. I have come here, or I had come here with one purpose. I have some work, main important work to do. That is why I have come. If they are disturbed, if those workers are disturbed by my presence, then I am not responsible for that. So why you are shouting at me? See his boldness. See his fearlessness with which he is facing the headman, who is the supreme authority in the village. He is afraid of none. Very innocently he says. Then the village headman says, I know what important work you have. Now I tell you, I warn you, so many times I have told you to be away from this place, and you are not listening to me. Now I am giving you the last warning. Now keep yourself away from this public appearance for 2 days until the king return to his capital. Because when the king arrives here, I don't want the king to know that there are fools like you in my domain. So I don't want your presence here. For this he catches that word fool, and he says again and again, when the headman is using that word, he cannot bear. So Mara even opposes that use of that word for him once again. He says, I don't think I am a fool. So you are calling me fool or lunatic and such things. But I don't think I am a fool. So very boldly he opposes the words of the headman. Then headman once again warns him. See, if you don't listen to my words, okay, I will put you in the dark cellar near the old temple. This is the last warning. For that also, Mara is not at all shaken. He again replies, okay, now if that is your wish to put me in the cellar, okay, put me there. Sitting in that cellar, I will pray God, and if the God feels that my wish is genuine, or if he feels that I should meet the king and convey the command of the goddess to the king, then of course the God himself will release me from that dark cellar. See the confidence the rustic Mara has in him or in his wish, because he is pure at heart, and what he desires is not for his own selfishness, it is for the welfare of the masses, it is for the welfare of all the people of the village. So he is not at all shaken, he is not at all afraid of the threats of the headman. Now the headman does not know how to handle this man Mara, because all the workers who are doing those road construction work, they are so afraid of the headman. They have so much of respect, reverence and even fear about this headman, whereas Mara has none of these. And he so boldly answers the headman, the headman's ego is hurt. So he does not know, because in the presence of Mara, even those workers take liberty to laugh at the comments made by Mara, which otherwise they would not have shown that courage. So now the village headman does not know what to do with him. And then Mara again repeats about his dream. He says, once again yesterday the goddess has come in my dream, and she reminded me that the king is arriving here tomorrow, and meet the king and convey to the king my command. And command is that the lake is to be built for the stream which passes through the village. So remember here, two things you have to remember. One is that Mara is a man who constantly has the dreams of the goddess river, the river goddess, that is Veda. And the second important thing is that when this first scene is taking place on the stage, we don't have this particular lake. There is only the stream which flows down, which comes down from the hill and passes through the village, and there is no lake so far. And now Mara's intention is that the goddess is continuous, the goddess of that particular stream, that stream Veda. Okay, the goddess Veda, she constantly comes in his dream, and she asks Mara to have built a tank for the water of that stream, which goes waste after being used by the people. The excess water it goes waste, it dries up or perishes, and the river goddess wishes that this water is to be stored. And she again and again comes in the dream of Mara, and she expresses her desire. Now once again she appeared in Mara's dream yesterday, and she reminded Mara that Mara should meet the king tomorrow when the king arrives at this place. Now how far the headman should believe in the words of Mara and his dreams it is left to you. Now how far you will believe in these things, it is also left to you. But usually what we think of, it comes in our dreams. This fact you must agree. So if while sleeping, if you have some fearful thoughts, then you will have a fearful dream. If you have some pleasant thoughts, then you will have the very pleasant dreams that night. So maybe this Mara is of a man of positive thinking. Maybe he might have thought about the water being wasted during its excess period, and the people dying of scarcity of water in the summer season. maybe he might have thought about this issue over and over again, and maybe because of this his own ideas have come in the form of the goddess in his dream, whatever it may be. Now for the village headman, who is a man who does not have any kind of a divine faith or this kind of things, or who does not believe in these things, or who does not have a very respectful character also, because the way the headman talks to his workers, even though the workers, each of them have good names, Racha, Bhima and all, he never calls them by their names. He simply calls them worthless fellow, wretched fellow, or you dwarf. So the way he addresses those people by his attitude of dealing with those workers, we can guess what type of character this headman has. Mark Twain has once said, that is, a character of a person is judged by the adjectives which he habitually uses in the course of his conversation. And if we apply this theory to our headman, then the headman will stand at the lowest level, because he does not have any respect for the other people, the workers, especially his subordinates. He treats them like animals. So as such, when Mara speaks about his dreams and all those things, so he appears like a mad fellow to the headman. Though he has a genuine person wish inside him for the headman, he appears like a lunatic. And he says, now the headman is convinced that if he just threatens Mara is not going to listen to him at all. So now he uses one more trick. He now tries to bribe Mara, because his ego is getting hurt in the presence of the workers, which he does not want to continue. So he wants to bring Mara on the track, and he says that, you see, if you keep yourself away from this site for 2 days, then I will give you a very beautiful gift, he says. And for that, Mara's ready answer is, no, I don't want any gift. One person has already given me the greatest gift of my life, he says. And the headman is shocked. Who has given you the gift then? And Mara instantly, without thinking, he says, of course, my father-in-law. So what is the greatest gift of life is? Obviously, his wife. And at this answer given by Mara, all the workers start laughing. And this is the end of our headman's patience. He can't bear it anymore. And now instantly he calls one of the workers among them, who was somewhat stronger among the other workers. He calls the strongest worker Bhima, and he asks Bhima to leave the implements there itself, leave his work there itself, and take the custody of Mara. Because so many times he gave the warning, and Mara is not at all going to change in any way, and he was fully convinced now. And now as a last resort, this headman hand overs Mara to the custody of Bhima. And when Bhima arrives there in front of Mara and the headman, Mara simply out of curiosity starts looking at the giant personality of Bhima. And before Mara could utter anything, the headman threatens Mara. He warns Mara, see, look at his giant personality, see how huge he is, and he is so powerful that he can swing means just move round. He can swing an elephant by its tail. So just imagine the size of the elephant, and this man, this Bhima, he can swing an elephant with its tail. So strong is the muscle power of this Bhima. And if you play some tricks with him, with Bhima, then he will crush you between his forefinger and his thumb. So be polite, be obedient in his presence, listen to him and silently follow him where he takes you. And now the headman, he directs this Bhima to take Mara to the cellar which is near the old temple and keep him as a prisoner there for 2 days until the king arrives. Now before Bhima and Mara could move, okay, this Mara has one small curiosity. And he cannot contain his curiosity, cannot keep quiet with his curiosity. So he puts directly the question to Bhima. So by watching this Mara, we can come to know how plain and simple he is. He is not aware of the consequences. He is not afraid of anybody. And what he feels, he talks. That's all. So now, on seeing the giant personality of Bhima, now Mara has a doubt. How can a human being grow to such a giant size? So he directly asks Bhima, how is it that you have grown so strong, or you have that giant personality? I would like to grow like you. And Bhima is ready with his answer. He says, I had drank the iron decoction when I was a baby, and I had lifted the grinding stones uphill, and because of which I have these strong muscles, or I have this huge body. And it is not had accidentally or without any effort, because I had put so much of efforts in my growth stages, so I could grow to this big size, he says. Then Mara says, even I would like to grow like that. Then the people like this headman, they will not be calling me mad or lunatic. They will be afraid of me. Even I would like to grow like you, he says. Then Bhima says, no, you can't grow like that now, because you should have drunk that iron decoction when you were a baby. Now that you are so grown up, you can't drink it and you can't come to my size also. So that is not possible now. And while Mara and Bhima, both of them, are busy chatting like this even more infuriates the headman, because his purpose was to hand over Mara to Bhima as his prisoner, and Bhima was the custodian of Mara, whereas here they are pretending as if both of them are the good friends, and this the headman cannot bear. So he now shouts at Bhima. He reminds Bhima that he is your prisoner, so don't give him that liberty to be so talkative or so friendly with him, and be serious. Bind him hands and feet and drag him to the cellar near the temple, and if he continues with his chatting or with his talk, then you can even gag him. Gag means to put something in the mouth so that the person cannot speak. Bonte hakudu ant ಹೇಳ್ತೇವಲ್ಲ ಬಾಯಿಗೆ. So that kind of a thing. So these instruction the headman gives Bhima and command him to take Mara to the dark cellar. And on the way, Mara says, no need to drag me. Okay, I follow you. I come with you. Come, let us go. And I will tell you also the dream or the dream in which the goddess had appeared, or the command of the goddess, or what work I have with the king. I will narrate you all these things on the way. Come, let us go. And both move in the direction of the cellar which is near the old temple. And here the headman, he commands his workers to continue with the work, and he asks them to move their swing quick fast so that the work can be finished by the end of the day. And he also gives them suggestion that if you are not in a position to complete the work by evening, then you will have to work by the lamplight. That means by the nightfall you will have to complete the work, because early the next morning the king is to arrive that way, and before that, at any cost, we have to finish the construction of this road. Now here ends the first act, first scene. And in this first scene we have seen mainly the interaction between Mara and the headman, and a slight interference of this Bhima. On seeing these the arguments or the talk between Mara and the headman, what ideas we have created or what ideas we have in our mind by now is, I don't know what you are thinking of, but what I feel is headman is a representative of a kind of a corrupt official or corrupt person in a position. He is doing the work for the sake of the salary he is paid. That's all. He does not have a devotion in the work. He does not want that the work should be done or completed with good quality, or he should have appreciation, or the work should benefit the people of the village. He does not seem to have such a higher level intention or thoughts in his mind. That is mainly the headman, the character of headman. For me, it appears like a kind of a negative character. Now, we don't have a much respect or regard for this man. Whereas Mara, if we watch him very carefully, he is not like the Mara of your third lesson, where that Mara used to tell so many strange, bizarre, bunkum stories, cock and bull stories, which were hard to believe. He does not seem like that Mara, and he does not seem like a madman also, a lunatic. He does not seem, even though this headman calls him a madman, he really is not a mad person, or he does not seem like a madman. As I told you, he seems to possess a meaningful forethought he has about the humanity, about his people, about his region. He wants that something is to be done for the people or for the problem of water scarcity. So he is a man of higher level thinking, we find. Though appears like a rustic, he is a man of higher level thinking. And the second thing we notice in Mara is the workers who are working under this headman, they are so afraid of the headman, they are not ready to speak out, even they are not so courageous to laugh also in the presence of the headman. Whereas this Mara is so bold to answer or object every statement made by the headman. Now you may call that those workers are being paid by the headman, that is why they are afraid, and Mara is in no way going to be paid by this headman. So it is not just the question of payment. He has the moral strength. As I told you, he is a very genuine character who has got the inner strength which we find seen by the other people and not the headman. Headman who himself is a flat character, a superficial character, he does not have who does not have respect for the others, so he fails to see the genuineness of the character of Mara. But later in the second scene, we find how the Mara's worth is recognized by the king in the second scene. So as we go to the scene 2, I hope you have followed the happenings in the first scene. So in the second scene, again here also the setting of the play or the drama is laid, or the incidents of the drama take place again on the same spot where the previous day the road construction work was going on. The only difference is the other day, the previous day, the construction work was going on. Now the road is fully ready, not just ready, it is fully decorated, and the people have gathered from different areas. They have come, they are standing in the rows, and some of the retinue of the followers, the attendants of the king are moving, and the trumpets are blowing. There is a complete festive atmosphere, and soon there is an announcement of the arrival of king. As the curtain rises, we see all these things happening on the stage. That is, the roads are fully completed, the roads are ready, and they are moreover decorated. The people have gathered there, and there is the blowing of trumpets, and there is the sound made by the different people who have gathered there, and huge the announcement made of the arrival of the king there. And when everybody is like this, watching or waiting to have a glance of the king, or they want to have the to look at the king who is arriving at that place. When everybody is very desperately watching for the arrival of the king, there is suddenly some disturbance in the middle of the way where the king is passing through, and all are disturbed. There is a kind of a disturbance from all the directions, because everyone is confused. What fell there on the ground while the king was passing through the road, and in the middle something falls there from the tree nearby, and everybody is surprised as to what has fallen here. What is that has jumped from the tree to the ground? Can you guess what might have fallen from the tree to the ground? Yes, can you guess? Yes, it is none other than Mara, the person who has jumped from the tree onto the ground and who has almost blocked the passage of the king is none other than Mara. And on seeing him, all the people gathered there who are familiar with him, they make out that it is Mara. It is Mara who has jumped off the tree. And they come ahead to explain to the king who he is and what type of man he is. But they are cut short by the king, and king asks Mara to speak out. He says, let him speak. Let him introduce himself to me, and let him say what work he has with me. Now one question to you is, how is it possible for Mara to jump from a tree and block the passage of the king? According to you, where is Mara now? In the last scene, we have seen that he is sent to a dark cellar along with Bhima, and he is to remain there for 2 days until the king returns to his palace the next day. Till then he is to wait there. Now how is it possible that Mara is jumping from the tree and blocking the passage of the king? So even the people are surprised. The people in whose presence Mara is sent to the cellar, even they are confused as to how is it possible for Mara to arrive there. Now king asks Mara to speak, and now Mara, who is called as a madman by our headman, he by using so many adjectives that are used for the king, your majesty, your highness, by using so many such high words, he addresses the king, and he says that I am a workless dog. So he himself calls by the same name used by the headman. He says, I am a worthless dog, but I have one command, one message to convey to you. And after I convey that message to you, you can trample me at the feet of the elephant which bears your royal presence. So on which elephant you are arriving here. So you can trample me at the feet of the same elephant, but after I narrate you what I want to say or what I want to convey to you. Then the king asked Mara, then why didn't you come in a normal way as all these people have come? You might have waited for my arrival amidst these crowds or amidst these people who, so many of whom have gathered here. You might have waited here. Then Mara says, no, that chance was not available for me. I was stoned at sight. I was even sent as a prisoner to a dark cellar near the old temple. But fortunately, the person in whose custody I was sent, that is the Bhima, Bhima, though he is giant in personality, he has a soul of a baby. And that man, when he listened to my words and when he felt that my wish is genuine, he let me go. He allowed me to slip away from his hold. And so at night, at the daybreak, When the cock crew, stealthily I came here, I climbed the tree, and I was sitting there hiding from the eyes of all these people, because if at all I was seen, then there was every chance of my being sent to the cellar again. So I was sitting there hiding from the eyes of these people, and now struggling so much, I have come to convey that message to you. Then the king asked him, what is that? That's such an important message that you want to convey to me. And for that, Mara now begins his story. First, he refers to a sacred spot. Sacred spot means pavitra sthala. Sacred means pavitra. He first refers to one sacred spot. He says, the place where you are standing now, where your majesty, where the king is standing now, is the place once Lord Hanuman stood. So long ago, in the mythology, we have heard the story of Lord Hanuman, Lakshmana, Sanjeevani, all those things. Okay. Now Mara says, on the same spot where your majesty is standing now, once stood Hanuman. He had come from Lanka, guided by the omens. Omens means shakunagalu. Guided by the omens, that Hanuman had arrived here in search of a plant called Sanjeevani, and Rama or the people from Rama's side, they wanted this Sanjeevani plant because Lakshmana, that is Rama's brother, he was wounded in the battle and he had reached a kind of a deadly faint, and unless he breathed this Sanjeevani plant, it was impossible for him to regain his breath. So, in search of Sanjeevani plant, guided by the omens, Lord Hanuman arrived here. He stood on exactly the same spot where the king, your majesty, is standing now, and he just looked around and he traced the Sanjeevani plant on the crest of the mountain, on the top of the mountain. On seeing that plant, he uprooted it. Uproot means kittuvadu. He uprooted the plant and he flew away again back to Lanka, and breathing that Sanjeevani, Lakshmana regained his breath. He stood on his foot. That is the mythological story. Okay. Now here, the place from where Lord Hanuman uprooted that Sanjeevani plant, from that hole is born a spring. And that spring is none other than river Veda, which flows down now in the regions where Mara, village headman, and the king has now arrived. So that area, the stream is flowing now, and it takes its birth in the hole, in the pond from where the Sanjeevani plant was uprooted. And since then, the water is flowing down from the hill, and it serves the villages on both the banks of its flow, and so many flowers, so many fruits are growing on both the banks. It even helps for the irrigation of the people of this region. It helps them in getting the drinking water. So in so many ways, this river Veda or this stream Veda is serving our people, that is your citizens, the citizens of your province. Okay. Then the king cuts him short and puts a question, that is, does the stream flow in all the months of the year? Is it continuous, or does it dry up in the summer season? Then Mara says, yes, I am coming to that point. So here till now he has now explained about the sacred spot and what is the importance of that spot. And now he stops the king and says that, yes, I am coming to that point. So about the flow of river Veda, or what message I want to convey you, that is exactly his dream, Mara's dream. He now wants to narrate to the king. So now he says, now I am coming to that point. See, the water flows down, it serves your citizens, your subjects here, and in the rainy season, when there is excess water, it flows away to the marshy grounds, to the far off place, and then dries up. That means the excess water, it goes waste. And in the summer season, as a result, the people face the shortage of water. This is a common phenomena, and we the people are facing it since the ages, since the centuries. This has been the common feature. That is, we are not able to store the excess water and store it for and use it for the summer season. So this always happened, and now also it happens the same thing. But now recently, the goddess of this river, that is goddess Veda, she appears in my dream, and she says that she is hurt by this kind of attitude of the villagers. The villagers are so heartless. They don't have a feeling of gratitude for me or for my waters. She says that Veda is my plaything. Okay, and you people are not showing respect to the waters of this Veda. You use the water as much as you want, and you just let go that water waste after using it. That is the excess water. You never think about the excess water, and this attitude of the people has hurt the goddess Veda, or the river goddess Veda, and she told me that unless you build a tank and store the water, I will make you suffer even more in the summer season. The Veda, the stream Veda being my plaything, what I do is, hurt by your attitude, I just block the water of this stream and does not allow it to move away beyond the forest region, and I make you die of water. I make you suffer from water because of your heartless attitude, and I does not allow the river to flow away and serve you in the rainy season. That is why I make you suffer. Such a useful water, such a valuable water, which is kind of a nectar, which revives or nourishes the mortals. Such useful water, you allow it to go waste, and that is why I am making you suffer. So unless you build a lake and store the excess water during the rainy season, I am going to continue this kind of attitude of mine, she said. So the command of the goddess is that the lake is to be built, and the water of the river, that is the stream Veda, is to be stored in a pond and can be used in the summer season. This is what the goddess Veda wishes, and she appears in my dream again and again, and she asked me to convey this message to you and take the necessary efforts to build a lake for this excess water. Now, after finishing his narration, he kneels down before the king and he says that I have completed my wish, or I have done the job given to me by the river goddess. Now he says, you can now trample me at the feet of your elephants, because I wanted to convey you this message from the goddess, and now that I have completed my work, so I don't bother. Even if you punish me for my arrogance, for my disturbing you or arriving here by this very unusual way, so you can punish me for that. And king, on hearing the narration given by Mara, he really thinks about this issue, and even the king feels that the wish expressed by Mara or conveyed to him by this goddess, if at all it was conveyed to him by the goddess, then it is genuine, and really something has to be done over this, so that the people will be saved, or the people will be saved from the crisis of water or the shortage of water in the summer season. So something has to be done, the king feels, and he says, No, you are a man of purpose. You are a man of noble purpose. And how can I trample you at the feet of my elephant when you have such a noble thoughts, and that too for the welfare of my subject, for the welfare of my kingdom? When you cherish such a useful thoughts, how can I punish you? So I would like to think over this in a very serious manner, and I would like to take up the necessary action for building a lake, but it cannot be done on the spot. So for this we will have to discuss, we will have to think over the pros and cons, and for this reason you must accompany me to the capital tomorrow when I will be returning by this route in the evening. And at the thought of the king, or when the king expresses his wish that Mara should accompany him to the capital the next day, Mara is stunned. He says, how can I come to your capital? See my attire. I am in such a rags, and how can I come to the capital? No, I wanted to convey my wish to you, and I have done that job, and now please don't compel me for that. Please excuse me for my inability to come to the capital. Then king, in a very serious tone, he says that it is my command and that is final. So you must follow me to the capital tomorrow, and together we both of us, we will sit together and we will discuss about the issue, and we will take out the necessary action for building the lake, whether to build or not, if at all it is to be built, what is to be done. So all these serious issues we will discuss, and for this reason be ready, it is my command and you should obey. And silently, with no other choice left, Mara obeys the command of the king, and he gets ready. He expresses his consent and is ready to accompany the king to the palace the next evening, when the king will be arriving by the same route. Here ends the second scene of the play. And here in this scene we have seen the two major characters. One is the old character which reappears here, that is Mara, and a new character is introduced. Now about the nature of the king we can't say much. He is like a good king, because a good king respects each and every subject in his kingdom. The good king, I am telling, not a very autocratic king. So as a good king, he has respected the voice of Mara, and he has taken the responsibility of taking some measures as regards this stream Veda. Now what aspect of Mara we see here? In the first scene, we have seen that Mara was portrayed in a very negative color. Worthless dog, useless fellow, lunatic, mad, good for nothing man, or busy, always in weaving the cock and bull stories, like that of thing. But here, in the presence of king, we find that Mara is not a mad man as called by the village headman. He is a genuine character, as I told you in explaining or in analyzing the character of Mara in the first scene. Okay, so as we have observed, he is a man with a very serious forethought, and he has a genuine desires in his heart, and not for his selfishness but for the welfare of the humanity. And this is really noteworthy thing in Mara, because this is a quality which we fail to find even among the highest educated or the most civilized or so-called sophisticated human beings in the modern day. They are so much educated, but they don't have a single thought how they waste the lakes and ponds, and how they behave the natural resources without any thought of the posterity, without any thought tomorrow what will happen to our children, not just our children, to the next generation, what will happen. They never have any kind of forethought, and they live in a kind of a hedonistic philosophy. They live with a hedonistic philosophy, eat, drink and be merry, and no thought of future, no forethought about the tomorrow. In spite of having a high qualification, in spite of having so much of living in a civilized society, they don't have that kind of a forethought. But this Mara, a simple man, a rustic man, a village man who is not educated in the sense that we use the term in the modern days. Okay, even though he is not educated by the books, but he is educated by the life. Or he is taught in the school of life, and he has so much of forethought for the humanity or for tomorrow. If the lake dries up, if the stream dries up, what will happen to us? How will we will be able to face the water crisis? So he has so much of forethought, and luckily King realizes or notices this kind of genuine purpose in Mara. He values him, and he promises to take some action with regards to his dream, and for that reason he is inviting Mara to his palace the next evening. So here ends the second scene. Now in the third scene, what happens in the third scene? In the third scene, which takes place many years after the meeting of King and Mara. So it takes place many years after the meeting between the king and Mara. Now whether the lake is built or not, we come to know here. The scene is now, this scene, third scene, it is laid beside a lake. Mara, who had appeared in the first two scenes also, he is sitting in front of his hut, which is located beside the lake. He is sitting near the hut, and the hut is located beside the lake, on the bank of the lake. What it means? Yes, the lake is built. The king took it very seriously, the desire, wish of Mara very seriously, and the lake is finally built. And when the curtain rises, we see Mara sitting beside the lake in front of his hut, and we hear a variety of sounds. The sound of the birds like seagull, then the rustling of the leaves, even the sound of the wavelets which are striking at the bank. So all these sounds we hear, and Mara is shouting at his son Ganga, who is somewhere nearby. He is busy with his games, he is playing somewhere, and now Mara shouts at his son. He calls him, and after insistent calling of Mara, his son Ganga arrives there. Insistent calling means constant, continuous calling by Mara. The son arrives there, Ganga arrives there, and he asks Mara why he was calling him, as if he has some many serious work. Because I was busy, I was watching something, suddenly he utters. And Mara says, what were you watching? Because you feel so disturbed by my calling, that means you must be busy watching something. What you were watching then? Then the boy says, I was watching a man catching fish in the pond, catching fish in the lake. Now at the very word that a man is catching fish in the lake, it enrages Mara. So he asked the boy to repeat the words. What you are telling? Is anybody catching fish in the lake? Is it true? Then the boy says, yes, he is catching, the man is catching the fish over there on the other side of the lake, and I was watching it hiding behind the tree. Enraged Mara takes his son along with him, and he approaches the man who was busy fishing in the lake. And on seeing Mara, he stops his work, and Mara takes him to task. Mara asks that man, what are you doing here? Then the man says, nothing, I am not doing anything. The rod is in his hand, remember. And yet the man says that I am not doing anything. I'm not catching the fish. Simply I am sitting here. Then what you are doing? Why the rod is in your hand? Why the catching rod is in your hand? Mara says, no, simply I was holding it. Then how did all these fishes have come into your basket? Did they walk into the basket while you were watching the sky? Mara asked the man, and the man is now silent. He can't answer. See, there are some people in the life we come across. The truth is crystal clear, and still like the fools they argue, no, this is not the truth, this is the truth. ಸತ್ಯ ಕಣ್ಣು ಮುಂದೆ ಸ್ಫಟಿಕದಷ್ಟು ಸತ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಅಲ್ಲ ಸತ್ಯ, ಇದು ಸತ್ಯ ಅಂತ ವಾದ ಮಾಡೋರು ಇರ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ in the same way this man who was catching fish, he argues with Mara that he was not catching the fish in the pond. So here please remember the plural of fish and fishes. See, sometimes we use fish for plural also, and sometimes we use fishes for the plural of fish. Now when to use fish and when to use fishes, you remember? Take for example the aquarium. The fishes are swimming in the aquarium. So here we use fishes, not fish, because aquarium has a variety of fishes. If the fishes are of different category, we use fishes for the plural. And if the fishes are of the same category, for example mackerel, one basket is full of angelfish or mackerel fish, we call it the basket is full of mackerel fishes, not fishes. Okay, so for a single variety we use fish only, even in the plural. For a variety of fish we use fishes. So this is a bit peculiar. There are some such peculiarities in English, but you are not to worry about such peculiarities. As you go on reading or as you go on expanding your reading zone, okay, you will come across gradually all these peculiarities of English, and then you will befriend English. English will not be a hard nut to crack for you. Okay, now the man again and again he argues with Mara that he has not caught the fish, and he was simply sitting there and simply holding the rod in his hand. Now Mara gets angry and he just throws the fishes that he has already caught and which were there in the basket and which were still alive. Okay, he throws them into the water, and he says, he warns the man that if you are seen once again in future catching the fish, then the next time the turn will be yours. So I will throw you, I will push you into the pond, and you will be the food for the same fishes. Okay, so mind it and never continue or never repeat this mistake. And then addressing his son, Mara addresses his son, and he says, he gives a long speech to his son. He says to his son that, see my son, this particular lake is built according to the wish of the goddess. It is built according to the command given by the goddess, and this whole place is divine. And the wish of the goddess is that no animal that arrives here, that moves here, either walking on the ground or skimming on the waters like seagull, or flying over in the sky, the birds, okay, or any animals moving on the ground, so no creature should be harmed. Many a time at midnight when I get up, okay, I have seen many a time a tiger comes and drinks water from the other corner of the lake, and it returns very silently. No one attacks that tiger, or no one make an attempt to hunt that tiger, because it is the God's command that all the animal, even the ferocious animal arriving to this lake, should return unharmed. So remember, after me, you will be there, you will be here as the watchman, and you must take care of all these things. So you are not to take these things lightly, you must strictly keep a guard over all these things. And then the man who was fishing, who was watching Mara and Ganga talking, busy with this kind of conversation, then he asked Mara, why are you making so much of a show of your power? After all, you are a watchman. and your duty is to watch the lake. That's all. Why you are bothered about all these things? Who has given you that kind of a supremacy or the authoritarian power over the lake? Are you the ruler of this region? No, after all you are a watchman. Then why you are pretending, why you are showing a kind of a over command over all these activities? Mara is enraged. Again he is infuriated by this man who was fishing, by his words. And now Mara speaks about his power, or what power he has over this lake. He says, yes, I am the supreme authority here with regards to this lake. It is but for me the lake exists today. If I were not there, there would not have been this lake. This river Veda now stays in our village because of me. Because the goddess commanded me, I conveyed the command to the king, and king took the initiatives to build this lake. So in my absence there would not have been this lake, and that is why I am the supreme authority, and that power is given to me by the king. So no one can question this, because every stone that is piled here for building the embankment for the lake, so it is laid before my eyes. If when the water should be allowed to flow, when the water should be stopped, or the gates are to be closed, or in what quantity water should be let loose. So all the decisions are taken by me. Even the king won't interfere. Even the person with the supreme power, even he can't take even a puddle of water from this particular lake. And he even mentions that headman, the person who once called me a fool, a lunatic. Even that headman today, if he wishes to have one pot of water, he must beg my permission, and that is my power, he says. And now talking for a long time about his authority over the lake, then he addresses his son, and he tells that fisherman that I have talked more than you deserve. Actually, I need not tell you about my powers. Who are you to ask me about my position here with regards to lake? So no need to give you the information. So I have unnecessarily talked much to you. And then he addresses his son, and in the meantime, when he was talking with the man fishing, okay, this Mara has watched something. One person had arrived at the lake, and he was taking his cattle to the water. He wanted the cattle to drink water from the lake, and Mara suddenly observed this scene, and Mara is a bit disturbed, because the place where the cowherd is taking his cattle is a bit dangerous place. It is bit deeper at that region. So suddenly he calls his son Ganga and sends him to that cowherd, and requests him to take the cattle bit away or off that place, so that there is no danger to the cattle which are brought to the lake. So what we find here is Mara takes his utmost care, or he puts all his effort that the best use of water is made, either for the human beings or for the animals. He allows the tiger to drink away the water. He allows the cattle to drink water. He allows the cowherds to take their cattle to the pond and make them drink the water. But he can't bear anybody hunting the seagulls. He can't bear anybody fishing in the pond. So no animal is to be killed. No creature is to be killed. The only thing is they can use the water without harming the creatures which are feeding on that particular lake. So what type of a concern he has, not just for the human beings, but for all the other human beings. So all the other living beings, he has so much of care. Now after sending that man fishing, see again and again I am using the word man fishing, not a fisherman. So there is a difference between a fisherman and a man fishing. because fisherman is a person who does fishing with his boat and net as his profession. And this the people like this man who fish with a rod and a pin, they are not the fishermen. Anybody, you and me, can also do, and many of you may be doing during this long vacation. If there is a stream or a pond nearby, during your leisure time, you may be sitting with a rod and pin, so that you can catch some fish for the curry. So such people we call as the man fishing, that's all, not the fisherman. They are not called as a fisherman. So now, after sending that man, after that sending the person who was fishing in the pond, Mara was about to return to his hut now, because it is it's time up now to go into his hut. It is evening, it is the nightfall, dusk period almost. So he is about to enter his house, or about to enter his hut, and then he comes across a man, and that man is quite unfamiliar. Mara does not know who he is. He is a visitor from a far off domain of the king's kingdom. So somewhat the border area. He had set out from his house the previous day evening and has reached Mara now today at the dusk period. So almost for 24 hours non-stop he has walked and reached the place. So from such a distant place he has come, and he says that I have come to meet you and I want to talk about the water of this lake. Then on listening to that man and the distance he has crossed since the previous day nightfall, Mara says, please have some food in my hut, okay, and then we will talk about the issue that you want to discuss. And before offering him food, he begs his pardon that I don't have much delicious food cooked in my house today, because my wife is away, she is not there, she is out of station, and myself and my son, only we two are here, and what we had cooked for us I am offering you, please manage with it, but it is enough to satisfy your hunger, that's all. Now why I am stressing this point, that is, Mara's wife is away from house, she is out of station, only Mara and his son are there in the hut that day, remember, okay, this, because this aspect will be stressed, or we come to know towards the end of the play why this point is to be stressed here. So his wife is out of town and he offers the food, and then the man, the visitor who has arrived, he tells Mara why he has come here, and he tells him that our region or our area, it belongs to the farthest domain of the king, it is in the border area, and our area is facing drought, famine, since over the years we can say, every year we face this kind of a water scarcity, and the fields are parching, the crops are parching, the cattle are dying for the scarcity of water, and so I have come here to discuss with you if something can be done, if some measures can be taken so that the water can be taken by the canals to my village. So I have come to discuss over this issue. And for that Mara says, of course, we will think, tomorrow I will accompany you, I will come with you, and we will see how far is your domain, or how far is your particular village, and how best we can try to provide you the water through the canals. So we will discuss over this, and according to the law, according to the provisions that are given in the law, we will provide you the water for both your fields as well as for your cattle. And by saying so, when Mara was now about to take bit rest, or when he was about to settle finally inside his hut, he suddenly notices something in the sky. The sky has suddenly changed color. The clouds are being built up. Even the water of the lake, which so far reflected the blue sky, and the water of which were almost sapphire like, completely in blue color, has suddenly turned its color. It is growing very muddy, and it is a sign that somewhere there is a heavy rainfall and the stream Veda is bringing that muddy water into the lake. And by looking at the sky, Mara also guesses that there is something, there is like some calamity likely to fall here that particular night. And suddenly he calls his son and he says that, come, let us move inside, because the heavy thunder or heavy rain is to arrive, and let us not take risk outside, and come, let us go inside. And he calls his son to go inside both of them, Mara and his son, they enter the house and they put the door of the hut. And here ends the third scene. And here again we saw another completely different type of Mara, isn't it? Mara as a watchman. As suggested in the title, the third scene completely portrays Mara in the light of a watchman. How a good watchman must be, what care a watchman should take with regards to the water bodies. So all that we see in this third scene. So he does not bear even a small kind of loss or small harm to the lake or to the inhabitants of the lake. So he cannot bear any harm done to the creatures which are dependent on the lake. Not just keep away the polluting the lake. He does not even allow to do any harm to the creatures of this lake. So a true watchman, he appears here. And another special, the point to stress here is he has so much of concern. Not just for the lake or just for the living bodies in the lake, but he also has a concern that the water of the lake should be of use to the maximum level. Means the most people should be benefited by this lake is the wish of Mara. Not just his family, not just his village, but he tries his best that the waters of lake can reach the farthest area, the farthest region of the kingdom, of the king's domain. So that is what we see in Mara, and that is also a very rare quality. See, when it comes to our lives, we think about the water storage in our borewell, in our well. If somebody, a person in our neighboring, in our neighborhood, if he is digging a well or if he is taking some actions for a borewell, then we are bothered that the water of our well would be affected. But Mara is not that type of a person. He does not think that if the water is shared to a distant place, the water will dry up or our village will suffer. He does not have that kind of a narrow-mindedness, and he thinks about the welfare of one and all. So far I have completed 3 scenes of this drama. This is a very long drama, though it is a drama of one act. Though it is a one act play, it is spread or it is split into 5 scenes and it runs to almost 20 pages. Now, after watching this video, you just go through all the 3 scenes. You just restrict yourself to the 3rd scene, and we will deal with the next 2 scenes in my next session. And at the same time we will also discuss why a topic like this watchman of a lake or pond or saving of water is given to you, the first PUC students. What is the intention behind introducing this lesson to you, or how you can be motivated by this story in your own lives, and as well as the question answers or the way how you will be able to write questions on this topic. We will discuss all these things in our next session. So till then,